Story number 1. This happened about 10 years ago. I at the time was dating my now husband, and we had planned a dinner with his family at his mother's house. The dinner was set for a Friday, and being that we were going there after work, we drove in separate cars. His mother didn't live in the best of neighbourhoods, but I wouldn't call it a ghetto by any means. When I arrived with my 2 sons, there wasn't any parking on her street, so I was forced to park on a side street next to her house. When I parked, I noticed how odd it was that her street was full of cars, but the side street I parked on was pretty empty, other than the houses. After getting out of the car, I was carrying my 2-year-old son, while my 10-year-old held my hand. I noticed a white pickup truck driving towards us at a very slow pace. He didn't appear to be looking at the houses, as someone would if they were looking for a house address. He kept his stare on us. As I kept walking to turn the corner to my mother-in-law's house, he drove right past us and never took his glare off of us. I locked eyes with him, and I was in the protective mummy mode, and he turned away and kept driving. After a few hours, it's late and dark outside, and we all get ready to leave. My 12-year-old stepdaughter wanted to ride home in my car. I told my husband I would meet him at home, since he was still saying his goodbyes and wasn't completely ready to leave. As we walk to the car, I have my 2-year-old son that I'm carrying, while my stepdaughter and son are walking next to me. As we turn the corner, I see my car, and I see the same white truck parked right behind it, with the creepy guy in the car, and his truck still running. There aren't many other cars parked on this particular street, so there should be no reason he's parked right behind my car. I tell the kids to be careful and stay close. As we got closer, his eyes lock with mine. Neither he or I look away. I see pure evil on his face. His expression never changes, and his eyes staring start making the hairs on my neck stand up. At this point, the kids notice him and start getting scared. I, for a split second, questioned if I should walk back to my mother-in-law's house, but for whatever reason, kept walking to my car. As I get to the back passenger side to open the door to put my son in the car, the guy reaches out of his rolled down car window to unlock his driver's door, all while not taking his eyes off of me. And as he gets out of the car, and before he even had the chance to run up to us, I scream as loud as I can for the kids to run. I start running still with my son in my hand, and my stepdaughter and son are in front of me, attempting to run away. As I'm running, I turn around, and sure enough, this creep is chasing us. My 10-year-old is slowing down, and I give him a little push while yelling, "Run! Run!" I was yelling at the top of my lungs, yet no one came out of their house to help. Right before I turned the corner, I noticed a patch of grass, and thought I was going to lightly throw my son there and let this creep catch me, since he was gaining on us, and I as a mother would of course rather him hurt me than any of my kids. Right before I did though, I see my husband run out of the house with his brothers, since his daughter made it back inside the house crying, telling him someone was chasing us. They ran, and the guy took off before they could even get a glimpse of him. The creep left his truck running, and he was nowhere in sight. We called the police, and when they examined his vehicle, they found his wallet, rope, and Clorox right in the front seat. The cops said whatever he was planning wasn't good. They eventually found him hiding under a car in a neighbour's driveway. They asked my stepdaughter and I to identify him. We were so shaken up, and just seeing him again made us so upset. He was taken away, and I couldn't sleep for days. I found out after his arrest, his fingerprints came back as a suspect in an unsolved murder. Even after all these years later, it still scares the hell out of me. I can't imagine what would have and could have happened to us, but I thank God nothing did. Story number 2. When I was 14, I had a paper route. Occasionally, I'd have to deliver newspapers to people who did not subscribe to the newspaper. One evening in the summer, I went out to deliver the extra newspapers, and my mum wanted to come with. My route would be just a few blocks, so we rode our bikes, and the whole trip lasted maybe 10 to 15 minutes max. This was back when people weren't too worried about locking their doors. I remember we left our garage door open, which was really dumb. When we came back, I came in the door and saw our sliding door was open a little bit, which was not uncommon. However, our dog was barking like crazy. My mum walks down the hall and comes back with a panicked look on her face. She very seriously asks if I'd been in her room. I tell her no, so she tells me to go in my room and lock the door. Someone had been in the house. I lock my door and grab the phone in case I hear something. I look out my bedroom window, which faces the backyard, and see my mum looking around. She comes back in and tells me to come in her room. All of my dad's guns were laid out on the floor. They were usually in gun cases, but they were all out and laying in a row. He had about 5 guns. The guns were always hidden in the back of his closet. We were scared. My mum called my dad to come home from work, but I don't know why she didn't call the police. My dad looked around and of course found nobody, and nothing was taken. My mum's purse was out on the kitchen table, and that had not been taken. My dad hadn't told anyone about his guns being hidden in the closet. How did someone know? We had one creepy neighbour next door, which we didn't really suspect at the time. I'm just glad we didn't walk in before they'd left. There must have been more than one person, because my mum's room was in the back of the house. A second person must have been looking out the window and saw us coming back. Story number 3. I was living with my parents and sister in Brisbane, Australia in 2008, which means I was 19. I remember my dad had just got Foxtel, cable TV in Australia, but only the TV in the lounge room could use the cable box. And I really wanted to somehow get cable in my room without paying $99 or whatever for a new box. So Dad one day went out and bought an AV transmitter and receiver. It was basically a 2-piece bit of hardware where you'd plug this tiny box into the cable TV in the lounge room and it would transmit a video signal to the receiver connected to the TV in my room. So one Saturday, I decided to connect it. My younger sister, 16 at the time, was the only other person home at the time, upstairs in her room. My room was downstairs. I opened the box and connected it. At first, I was going back and forth, trying to get the cables right, trying to get the channels right, etc. But no luck, until I finally got something. I remember just sitting there, and something started fuzzing in. This is where things start to feel like a horror movie. I remember thinking, oh here we go, and waiting to see the picture come in clearly. As it started fuzzing in, I remembered that this whole time, the cable set-top box wasn't even on, and that's why it wasn't working this whole time. But then why was I getting a signal? It seemed to all hit me at once, as I realised the box was off, the picture fuzzed in, and I saw a bed. I freaked the fuck out, as at first I thought it was my bed. I'd recently seen Saw 2 and remembered that scene where she turns on the TV and it's a camera filming her in her apartment. That was the first thing I thought of. I sprinted upstairs to my sister, absolutely terrified. I told her to come down and take a look. She came down and we both realised it wasn't my bed. We didn't know whose bed it was, or how I was getting the signal. Obviously it was the AV receiver picking up a camera signal, but we were just so confused as to who or what it was for. Eventually my parents came home, and we concluded that it would have to be a neighbour or someone living close by for us to be receiving the signal. We waited around until about 6 PM, and then someone came into the room. My dad recognised it as one of our neighbours. We still didn't know what the camera was for, but we assumed it had something to do with fidelity. Either his wife or he had set it up to watch the other to see if they were cheating. Either this, or it was to tape themselves having sex. We entertained the idea that he was a murderer and would film himself murdering people in this room, but just to freak each other out. We'd always make jokes about how one night we'd turn it on and it'll just be his face with clown makeup on, staring at the camera waving, and then him walking out of the bedroom with a knife. This never happened, but what did happen was still super creepy. We connected to this signal for over a week, but after a few days the novelty kind of wore off. We felt a bit weird watching it and just resigned to the explanation that it was just to catch his wife cheating, until one day we turned it on and realised what we had discovered. Our neighbours were having a bunch of renovations done to their house. During weekdays they would be out and there would be workers at the place pretty much all day. It had been like this for over a month. We started watching the feed and saw a man walking to their room. It was the plumber that had been there regularly for the renovations. We didn't think anything of it until he started opening drawers. I called out to my mum, the only person home at the time, and we started watching it. He started getting out the wives' underwear and sniffing them, doing all that creepy shit. At first we were like, oh my god, how embarrassing, he's being filmed. Will the neighbours see this somehow? But then what happened next was truly terrifying. He slowly walked over to the camera and looked right down the fucking lens. We were convinced that he knew we were watching. My mum immediately called Dad. I kept watching. He started fiddling with it and then put it back down. I told Mum that I don't think he knew we were watching, but he's definitely the guy that put the camera there. Dad came home and by this time the plumber had left. Much to Mum's pleading, Dad went over to the neighbours to tell them what we saw. Mum wanted to completely stay out of it and was terrified, understandably. When we told the neighbours, they had no idea what we were talking about. They allowed Dad to go up to their room, and what he found that was holding the camera was an installed device in the wall that was designed to monitor water usage. The plumber had installed this into the wall, but he had fitted a camera behind it in the wall to watch the bed. Immediately they called the police, who came over and conducted an investigation. For the next week or so, we didn't hear much about it. I spent most of my time just telling my friends, showing them pictures, but truthfully, my whole family was scared every night. It was just very creepy thinking that we could have stuff like that hidden in our house. Chances are we didn't, but it was still really scary. After a couple of weeks, my mum was speaking to the wife next door and asked what happened with it all. The wife said the police found out he would, at nights, come to our street and sit in his car, which had really tinted windows, and watch them on his laptop. When Mum told me this, I got the biggest shivers. The reason was, besides the obvious creepy dude sitting in his car, watching people through a hidden camera, was because on multiple nights, when we had driven home late from my girlfriend's or walked home drunk after a night out, I remember seeing a station wagon, always about 30 metres down the street from our house. It was never there during the day, always at night. I'd always walk past it and look at my reflection in the windows, assuming no one was inside. I was always so confused by whose car it was, but literally never thought it was anything. It still scares me so much that it was just some creepy fucking plumber sitting back there on a laptop, watching a hidden camera stream of my neighbours. Story number 4. When I was 17 years old, I was coming back from a party at a friend's house a few miles away. There had been some drinking going on, like most high school parties, so obviously I wasn't fully cognizant of everything going on around me. My friend lived on a large piece of property, where their closest neighbour was about 3 to 5 miles away. My parents weren't wealthy, and we couldn't afford a car for myself, so this left me to walk home by myself, half buzzed and drunk. I wasn't worried though. My house was only a few miles away, and I was in a relatively safe town. The quickest route to get back to my house had several large, winding roads that went through a rural area of town. So naturally, that's the way I took. Here's where it gets creepy. After rounding a corner of the winding road, I was continuing my walk when I heard a mysterious voice say, "Run." The voice wasn't familiar, and I don't know where it came from. Maybe it was just instinct. Being in a half-drunken state, paranoia kicked in immediately. I ran to the closest bush and hid for about 5 minutes. After some waiting, I see the headlights of a car coming around the corner. Was this what I was supposed to run from? Even if it wasn't, I stayed hidden. The vehicle that rounded the corner was a black van, a Ford E350 to be specific. The van passed me, going the speed limit, showing no signs of stopping. The van came to a screeching halt about 150 to 200 feet away from where I was hiding. Two guys hopped out of the van and started searching the area frantically. I wondered if these guys had been following me. I slowly started to quietly move from bush to bush, trying to get a distance from the vehicle. The guys kept searching, and eventually I had quietly moved another 100 feet away. Even though I had moved further away, these guys kept getting closer and closer to the bush I was hiding behind. When they were about 25 feet away, I heard one say, "Forget it, we can just find another one." That statement made a tingle run down my spine. Eventually, they loaded back up in their van and drove off. I waited half an hour to give them distance and to make sure they were gone. I didn't want to encounter them later. I eventually made my way back home safe that night, dazed and confused about what had happened. I never told my parents about the encounter because I didn't want them to stop letting me go to parties. A few days pass and I hear a story on the news. A couple of guys had been cruising around in a black van, picking up teenagers in rural areas and killing them with axes. Yes, the guys who had followed me and searched for me were axe murderers, and they were ready to kill me. They'd killed two girls until the killers were discovered in my town. I wondered if maybe they had killed more teenagers in other states. I still feel uneasy telling this story, even though it happened years ago. I narrowly avoided being chopped up because a voice told me to run. Story number 5. The year was 1989, and I was around 4 or 5 years old and living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, at a housing shelter for homeless and low-income families, located on Stenton Avenue in Germantown. A horror in of itself. There were constant and ever-present bullies and troublemakers, low-life alcoholic and/or drug-addicted parents, and almost zero parental guidance. But that's not the point of this story. I was a really cute kid, and often caught the attention of adoring adults. So it wasn't immediately disconcerting to my mother when a young couple staying at the shelter began spending time with me. I liked them. I remember them as Tom and Carol. They were nice and seemed to enjoy having conversations with me. They usually offered some kind of treat, and we all know that's the way to gain the favour of children. Anyway, I remember the venue for our encounters becoming increasingly intimate, meaning that at first we would always meet in the common areas, until eventually they gained familiarity with my mother and began inviting me to their dorm room. I didn't mind, as I liked them and counted them as friends. We would meet in their dorm room and things were always pleasant. They would talk to me, and I really enjoyed the attention and being talked to as a contemporary and not as a child. I looked forward to the time we would spend together and always felt disappointed whenever my older brother would show up. He always showed up, especially when Tom and Carol began asking my mother if I could accompany them to the store or the laundromat. My older brother would always rear his head, and I remember wanting him to go away. Tom and Carol were my friends, and I didn't want to share them. Anyway, things went on this way for some time. I can't remember specifically how long though. I do remember looking for Tom and Carol one day, and not finding them. I was disappointed and a little sad. They were my friends, and they were gone. They didn't even say goodbye, just an empty dorm. Around that time, my mother shared an upsetting story with me. As it turned out, the FBI came and arrested Tom and Carol as they were suspected in the disappearances of several children. A man from the FBI interviewed my mother, and she didn't mention that I had anything to do with them, and neither did any of the fellow tenants. I guess that keeps in with the tradition of not talking to the police, so I was never interviewed. My mother also explained that she was the one sending my older brother to keep an eye on me. My very flawed and very street-smart mother. She played it cool and allowed me to have friends, but sent her henchmen to suss out the situation. Tom and Carol, I can't remember your faces, but somehow I can see those of the children you stole away from their parents and introduced to a terrible fate. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed.